Hello, psychologist Yulia Latunenko is here with a new topic, 7 signs of a person's immaturity. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please subscribe and don't forget to like this video. This really helps in promoting my channel on YouTube. So, 7 signs of immaturity. Where do we start? It's the external blaming position of a person. A person cannot take responsibility for their actions, their feelings, their words, their illnesses, their life. That is, a person always shifts responsibility onto external objects. Such a person will never say, yes, I messed up here. I did something wrong. I acted incorrectly. I should have acted differently. And I acknowledge my responsibility for this action. Or I said some unpleasant words to my loved one. And then, when the person is offended, the partner is offended, the one who said those bad words says, well, it's your fault that you made me say such words. You were the one who made me angry. You were the one who scared me. You were the one who made me feel bad. But it should be noted here that every person is responsible for their own feelings, even their subconscious ones, because there is always a choice in how to react to a particular situation. That is, there is always a subconscious choice for a person, whether to follow the familiar cycle of their usual reaction, yes, their model, which may have been formed even in childhood due to childhood traumas, or to become aware of what is happening now, what feeling, towards whom I am feeling it, and take responsibility for it and continue working on oneself. That is, such a person will never take responsibility for what they do, how they react to this or that situation, for what they do, for their decisions, choices. External objects will always be to blame. By objects, I mean those people or certain circumstances that a person will immediately bring up to explain why they acted or decided to do something in a particular way. So, this is the first sign of a person's immaturity. Only a child cannot take responsibility for their actions and decisions, words, cries, or whims. And even a child by adolescence, because after adolescence, a child gradually begins to take responsibility. That is, parents should cultivate a sense of responsibility for what I do, for what I commit. But still, only partially here. Only an adult is capable of taking responsibility for what they do, what they feel, how they react. The second sign of a person's immaturity. A person does not know how to define their own boundaries. That is, such a person doesn't even understand where my boundaries are, where your boundaries are. Such a person will always allow their boundaries to be violated and will themselves violate boundaries. And then will wonder, why do people treat me this way? Because, the brain often deceives us into understanding why exactly people treat us this way. We don't have an objective, sober view of our actions if we are immature people. If we are mature people, we already know how to observe ourselves from the outside, to observe our feelings and actions. We anticipate people's reactions to our words and actions. We consider whether such an action or words might violate another person's boundaries. Only an immature person doesn't think about anything. They are reactive. They don't have time to feel themselves. They don't have time to establish contact with their inner self. They might agree to something they don't need at all. They rush to say yes if they were raised in the style of a good girl or good boy. such a person also commits violence against themselves in this way. But the accumulated aggression from such a behavior style doesn't go anywhere. Then such a person becomes demanding, they make claims, they violate the boundaries of others. There is no sober perspective and no understanding of what personal boundaries and the boundaries of others are. So at this point, I have already talked about the third sign. So the first sign is responsibility. The second sign of immaturity is that a mature person violates their own boundaries. The third sign of immaturity is that the person violates the boundaries of others. Here it is very difficult to realize that I am violating the boundaries of other people. Well, one can realize that their boundaries have been violated, a little later. Eventually, yes, time will pass, and such a person wonders, my God, how did I even allow this? But when we violate boundaries, we need to take responsibility for it right away. We may find it very difficult to notice this moment. The fourth sign that a person is immature. This concerns finances. The person does not know how to rely on themselves. Well, not only finances. They also don't know how to rely on their own decisions, choosing something, often hesitating, doubting their choices. And also regarding money, this person is helpless. They don't know how to financially support themselves. They don't know how to provide for their children. This person simply does not know how to earn a living. Their attitude towards money is one of scarcity. Their attitude towards themselves is also one of scarcity. I won't be able to, nothing will work out for me, so I won't even try. It's better if I find someone else who will provide for me. Very often in our society, yes, women have this stereotypical thinking that someone should provide for them. But no, this is a sign of immaturity. Every person, regardless of gender, every adult should be able to provide for their own life, meaning being financially independent. That is, I earn enough to provide myself with food, some pleasures, rest, entertainment, and medical care. In other words, a person should have enough money for all of this. Now we will move on to the fifth sign of immaturity. But as always, in the middle of the video, I ask you to subscribe to this channel and give it a like. Don't forget, this really helps my channel to advance on YouTube. Also, if you have noticed at least one sign of immaturity in yourself, it means you have a childhood trauma. Just because stressful situations occur in childhood, the process of human development is disrupted, and this requires working through. Let's move on to the fifth sign of immaturity in a person. The person is afraid of loneliness. The person is dependent on having someone nearby. We call such traumas abandonment traumas. When a child experiences many such episodes in childhood where significant, adults abandon them. Abandonment can occur not only physically but emotionally as well, and emotional abandonment plays a significant role here. Therefore, such an abandonment trauma leads to the person always searching for some external object to cling to, like a child. In other words, searching for an external mother who will love, comfort, provide warmth, and give love. That is, if you are a woman and you are afraid of loneliness, you look for maternal functions in men. If you are a man, you also look for maternal functions. As they say, girls marry their mothers. Boys also marry their mothers. I mean, immature people. So loneliness, the fear of loneliness is a result of having an unresolved or childhood trauma, and this needs to be addressed. I myself had this trauma, and It took me a lot of time to work through it because the trauma was very deep. I was very dependent on having someone next to me, hugging me, holding my hand. And it seems like you're looking for someone to cover up, to fill that hole that hurts from the feeling of being alone, lonely. In other words, you use another person to cover up that hole. Essentially, the person is not a partner, but a mother. And we instrumentally use them as a function to protect against the feeling of loneliness. But every adult should be happy regardless of whether someone is nearby or not. The sixth sign of immaturity, which is very common among men, is not being separated from their parents. Yes, it seems that women find it a bit easier to separate, but there are also many women who are not separated from their parents. It is much more difficult for men to separate. If you're interested, I can tell you sometime how women and men separate from their parents. The process is a bit different here. But today is not about that. And not being separated from parents involves feelings of guilt towards them, pity for them, fear that they will be offended or that they will die. It's a very strong connection where you can't say no to your parents because you're afraid they will be offended and abandon the child who is actually an adult. In other words, they don't have boundaries with their parents and don't know how to stop them when they act in a despotic and unacceptable manner. That is, they make exceptions for their parents because, after all, they are parents. It's mom. How can I tell her, Mom, please don't come over without warning? It's mom, right? It's sacred. That's what lack of separation is all about. No, the person has not become equal to their parents, has not become an adult, so they are afraid to set boundaries with their parents. And the last seventh sign of a person's immaturity is a lack of initiative, driven by fear and shame. The person is afraid to start something, doesn't take risks, and somehow predicts in advance that nothing will work out for them. They fear failure, fear of falling short, and often dream of achieving a very high result, wanting to skip the process where a person climbs step by step from zero, through 10 steps to reach the 10th step where the desired result is already present. They sort of edit out the journey where one might fall to their knees, lose something, or experience the shame of failure. This person does not want to be a learner. They simply imagine the result. They do not want to be in the process because they fear shame, fear failure, and fear taking risks. Therefore, such a person lives as if they are drifting with the current. They cannot be socially successful because these childhood traumas, which have formed insecurity and low self-esteem, block the person, and they are simply afraid of adult life. Therefore, if you have found at least one sign of immaturity in yourself, it means that you have a childhood trauma that affects your adult life. I also remind you that your subscriptions, likes, and comments are very important activities for promoting my channel. The more active you are, the more it motivates me to create new and useful psychology content for you.